Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we've got another top 10 list, the top 10 best hit songs of 2004. So this is the third big top 10 outside of the current year that I put together. And I think it's conducive to describe how this year differed in trends and sounds in comparison with those I have discussed before. I mean, 2010 was at the height of the club boom overexposure, and everything that charted, good or bad, was either informed by it and painfully dated, or ignoring it and sliding rapidly towards novelty. In other words, it wasn't exactly a good year. Now 1967, well, that was a year heralded by many as overstuffed with classic songs, but you could make a credible argument that it was an off year for many of the established greats like the Beatles, more transitional than anything else. Now 2004 has some elements of both. On the one hand, the charts were very much in the throes of the crunk explosion, but by proxy it was heralding hip-hop's utter dominance of the Hot 100 going forward. Yeah, in 2004 indie rock was blowing up like you wouldn't see again for nearly a decade, most of which would hit the charts a year later because the rock charts are slow like that. But 2004 hit the sweet spot where the kinks of southern hip-hop were getting ironed out and allowing for more diversity in the scene beyond New York and LA. We were getting a lot of hits out of the Midwest, and that was only a good thing, as 2004 was a huge breakthrough year for a number of acts that are now touted today with a ton of critical acclaim, either for landmark debuts or critical high points that they would seldom, if ever, reach again. And when you tack on the fact that pop rock was beginning its own rise, country hadn't started sliding into vapidity, and R&B was seriously holding its own, it was a pretty damn good year. Hell, the only genre that seriously suffered was mainstream pop, but that's more because hip-hop crossovers were doing its role that much better. And when you consider that it really didn't have the stark low points of, say, 2007, you can make a very credible argument that 2004 was one of the best years of the 2000s, at least for the Hot 100, and I can't even say it was colored hugely by my nostalgia. Yeah, I know, and like a ton of this Hot 100 back when I was a teenager, and I like it now too. But it's hard to deny that in a year flush with the debuts of Kanye West and Maroon 5, Usher's best album, Alicia Keys' best album, plus high points for Avril Lavigne and OutKast, that we got something really special in 2004. And if you think that I just spoiled a lot of my list, well, maybe a little bit, but you haven't seen nothing yet, so let's get this started with number 10. So here's something that does need to be established a little bit further before we go forward. Nostalgia, specifically emotional nostalgia, because like it or not, while I tried to shove it aside in the beginning here, there is always an emotional undercurrent to how art is perceived and remembered. And while that would have definitely been true for my 2010 list as well, that was also an era where I was a little bit more in touch with the critical discourse around that music of the time, and thus it wasn't quite as formative from my emotions of the songs like beneath, say, 2004. And while I've always bucked against traditional markers of cool in all of my content, and when we start talking about country music on this list, you will definitely understand why, there are two songs on this list proper that no self-respecting critic who cares about being cool would ever canonize. And yet
15, there's still time for you. Time to buy and time to lose. 15, there's never a wish better than this. When you only got 100 years to live.
You know, Nathan Rabin once coined the term Dawson's Creek rock to describe songs like this, and yeah, he's not wrong. Wistful, middlebrow, unthreatening, intended for montages of sensitive white young men staring off into the middle distance. And Five for Fighting is close to the text version of that character. Sensitive piano balladry that's not quite as smart or insightful as Ben Folds, and would have generally been regarded by scorn by critics and audiences alike. And yet, while this song is not quite as genuinely great as his follow-up The Riddle a few years later, I really came to love this song regardless. Part of it is yearning earnestness has always had more resonance for me than self-conscious irony. Part of it was how Five for Fighting extrapolated the main melody line from The Cure of all places. And part of it is that it's not especially schmaltzy like James Blunt or Daniel Powter would turn out to be in subsequent years. Hell, the flat acknowledgement that you only have so much more time left to live is kind of poignant, especially notching up how so much of it is just a series of moments that are gonna go by too fast. And yeah, it's willowy, it's kind of wimpy, and this guy is so lucky that Adult Alternative kind of had an off year in 2004. I mean, I would take this over Sheryl Crow's god-awful cover of The First Cut Is the Deepest. But in terms of songs charting on the progression and poignancy of life lived, well, it's not the only one on this list, but it deserves to be there all the same. Number 9. You know, I remember when Maroon 5 was good. Can we go back to that?
Look for that girl with the broken smile. Ask her if she wants to stay a while. She will be loved. She will be loved.
So this was not Maroon 5's biggest song in 2004. That would be This Love. And while that track has its fans, it's not exactly one I'm eager to revisit, mostly as it was playing in territory that even then was pretty damn obnoxious. But She Will Be Loved was Adam Levine and Maroon 5 playing in more sensitive, emotive territory. And really, mid-tempo balladry was a really good look and sound for them in 2004. The gentle, liquid guitars, Adam Levine underplaying for once, the content that, okay, yeah, it's a song about an insecure, damaged girl in a big world, and it's very clear that Adam Levine is playing the other man outside of whatever destructive relationship that she's in, and the video only seals that. But it's also very clear this is not his story, which is what gives the song a lot of its resonance. It's more of her tale. And I like the fact that while Adam Levine clearly wants to be that guy for her, he never outright says that he's the one that's gonna step in. There's an element of melancholy in acknowledging that she will be loved if she shows up at the right place, but there's no guarantee that it's gonna be Adam Levine doing it. And you know what? On that note, it's a great, underrated gem of a little song by Maroon 5, which somehow shines all the brighter in comparison to what they became in later years, and you know what? I can respect that. Number 8. So I mentioned that most mainstream pop suffered in 2004, but that was more because the genre didn't really know what to do with its traditional starlets. Yeah, sure, Britney Spears would stick around despite a few very rough years ahead of her, but a lot of the pop artists would either slip towards R&B and fail, or head towards a rootsier sound, either in pop rock or adult alternative. Think like Ashlee Simpson, or Pink, or Nelly Furtado. At the same time though, there were also artists who didn't even seem to make much sense in the traditional pop archetype. So the fact that this turned out to be a hit still kind of blows my mind.
But I will go down with this shit, and I won't put my hands up and surrender. There will be no white flag above my door. I'm in love and always will be.
Yeah, of all the songs that won't win me a lot of credit among hipper critics, this is the second one. Although, reading through old reviews, this song actually did have fans at the time. This is coming off of Dido's second album, after her first record sold 21 million copies worldwide and went 4 times platinum in the States alone, mostly off the lingering crossover success with Eminem on Stan. But as a pop star on her own, though, she fell in a weird lane. For while Thank You had made her a coffee shop and Lilith Fair darling in 2000, White Flag was a darker tune, with a much deeper undercurrent of sadness that sticks with you in a weird, ethereal sort of way. From its programmed beats, the glittery fragments around her, the swell of arranged instrumentation playing off the very gentle guitar work, and a bridge that leads into a rather stunning climax and swell. It's a song that plays bigger than it can arguably back up, except with Dido's very intimate vocal pickup and absolutely effortless, aching poise pulls together a song where she very maturely tries to process her emotions post-breakup and fails. Yeah, despite it being her mistake that ended things for good in this relationship, which she just has to accept, she can't just surrender to her feelings here, which is playing against what you would expect from her. Again, this is the sort of material that soundtracked middlebrow pablum for years, but you know what? There was something real to it, and that's what got me coming back to it again and again. And you know what? I can appreciate it and respect it for that. Number 7. Well, alright, might as well get this one out of the way.
God show me the way because the devil's trying to break me down. The only thing that I pray is that my feet don't fail me now. And I don't think there's nothing I could do now to right my wrongs. I wanna talk to God, but I'm afraid cause we ain't spoken so long.
At this point, the culture industry has done a remarkable job cementing Kanye West into the A-list and his debut album, The College Dropout, as a classic. And thus it shouldn't be any surprise for me to come up here and say that, yeah, a lot of that was true and deserved. And while The College Dropout definitely has its problems, its lead-off single was the one thing a lot of hip-hop heads desperately wanted to get huge in 2004. I'll be honest, there's not a lot of hip-hop on this list because most of the crunk I love is good without being quite great. And yet, even at its best, it wasn't smart music, and it didn't have the ambition for a song like Jesus Walks, a song that recasts the struggle of black men in America as biblical, almost Job-like, something that Kendrick Lamar would later extrapolate to tremendous effect last year on Damn. But Jesus Walks was more than just a thunderous statement of purpose that referenced police brutality with that military background and intentionally provocative music video. It was a statement about how an ambitious young producer and hip-hop artist could blow past mainstream expectations for his music and put together a song with a huge hook shouting Jesus Walks, not just on the radio but in the club as well, a living penance for Kanye's sins whenever it came on. So yeah, if the song is awesome, why isn't it higher? Well, for as much as I like Kanye's early years, his penchant for very dated, very corny pop culture references did stick with him even here, with the Regis and Kathleen Lee reference on the second verse and the Happy Gilmore reference on the first. I get why it's being used, I get the subtext, doesn't make it any less goofy or jarring with respect to the larger tone of the song. But anyway, you don't need another critic to tell you why Kanye West's work in 2004 was excellent, so let's move on. And go listen to the song a few more times. It's awesome. Number 6. So there are 2 country songs on this list, and for those of you who only remember the Toby Keith side of country in the early to mid 2000s, you might be surprised by that. And really, I get it. That was not the country that was running up the headlines and probably wouldn't even be nowadays. But when I did realize how not only did this song become a staple for this artist, but also a go-to karaoke song for me at country nights that cuts way deeper than I'd probably like to admit, especially considering who made this song, yeah, it made this list. It belongs here.
And I loved deeper, and I spoke sweeter, and I gave forgiveness I've been denying. And he said, someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying.
So Tim McGraw has always been a massive singles artist more than an album artist, netting a frankly disturbing slew of #1 hits on the country charts, and this was one of his biggest in his prime, the lead-off single to an album of the same name that also won him a Grammy, and it was deserved for this song, taking a pop instinct that's always characterized Tim McGraw's best crossover hits and pairing it with lyrics that show what somebody tends to do when a relative of theirs might not have that much time left. And when you realize by the second verse is about a father-son relationship, and Tim McGraw made the video as a tribute to his own father who later passed away from brain cancer, it gives it the sort of a lived-in gut punch that has characterized Tim McGraw's best songs. But it's also not mournful, not really. Like Cole Swindle's You Should Be Here, it's a celebration of all that life at its biggest, in its brightest strokes. And by the time you get the key change that just knocks this song into the stratosphere for the final hook, Tim McGraw had another bona fide smash beneath him, and for once, for as boring as he can be, it's so well deserved here. Number 5. So on the one hand, you got Tim McGraw making his big Grammy-winning opus about life in the face of death that was a borderline pop crossover with the big strings and the greater sense of opulence. But there is a flip side to that in country, one more personally told, a little bit more stripped back, a little bit more traditional, from a veteran who will nearly always land on this list if he ever shows up on the year-end Hot 100.
Remember when I was young, so were you, and time stood still, and love was all we knew.
There's a part of me that thinks that Alan Jackson wasn't really expecting this song to be as big as it was, especially considering it is from a second single from a second greatest hits compilation and was as stripped down and personal as ever. And yet it went on to move over 1 million units, and dig into the details, you kind of see why, telling the full story of a relationship from beginning to end in a flashback montage. And what has made Alan Jackson such a profoundly moving storyteller is that he never pulled any of his punches. From the first time they were together, it wasn't good. The pain in their relationship and their story lingers. The conflict gets just as much airtime as all the good times with kids and family, especially when the years start to slip by faster and faster and faster. And when you pair it with an amazingly well-arranged interlude with the guitar, the strings, the pedal steel at just the right time with a phenomenal melodic crescendo there, it is the second song on this list of somebody taking stock of their life in the big picture. And for Alan Jackson, he's easily a much more compelling presence than Five for Fighting. Another staple from a man whose career seems to be nothing but Remember When is a stunning song, definitely deserves to be well remembered. check it out if you haven't heard it. Number 4. So I know some of you are probably wondering, with all these saccharine cuts on this list, where's the anger, where's the intensity, where's the firepower, where's the rock? Well, as I've said before, I didn't really have an angry white boy face as a teenager. I didn't listen to the post-grunge and nu metal of the time, and a lot of it didn't make the charts anyway. And when I was listening to symphonic metal in 2004, I sure as hell wasn't going to be listening to Evanescence's sloppy writing and shockingly bad production on My Immortal, their big hit in 2004, especially if I had Nightwish and Within Temptation dropping far better projects that same year. That said, if there was a band that captured my dispassionate teenage angst and actually has held up 14 years later, might be cliched, but it's definitely these guys.
I've become so numb, I can't feel you there. Become so tired, so much more aware. I'm becoming this. All I want to do is be more like me and be less like you.
Rarely has there been a song about losing one's emotions or feeling about something or someone that's this intense and actually believable in it. I'll be the first to admit that I might have just been bad timing with the release of Hybrid Theory to tap into any sort of teenage angst for me, but Meteora and Numb especially got there. Most because Linkin Park have an uncanny ability to string together their angst with impressively melodic hooks and a genuine curdling rage of burnout and smothered feelings. What's kind of ingenious about the song is its universality. It could be a toxic relationship, or a parental figure, or society, or the system at large that is crushing down our protagonist towards conformity, but it fits in, especially when the song is just empathetic enough to show the cycle continuing from before on that bridge, which is the song where it really picks up its gut punch against the glitched out synthesizers and the seething guitar line that really does hit well. Also, I'd be remiss not to mention Numb Encore, the Jay-Z collaboration that is sadly not quite as good as you remember it. Most because Jay-Z is in pop crossover I don't really care enough to try mold, but it also got them both another Grammy, so if you need your burnout angst pressed through another filter, this time with hip-hop, there it is. Although for me, I'm gonna stick with the pure version. For Numb, it can really still cut all the deeper. Number 3. And speaking of anger that has held up surprisingly, amazingly well.
You were everything, everything that I wanted. We were meant to be, supposed to be, but we lost it. All of the memories so close to me just fade away. All this time you were pretending, so much for my happy ending.
So in 2004, Avril Lavigne released Under My Skin, her darker, meaner, heavier follow-up to Let Go in 2002. And while it doesn't quite have the immediate star-making singles in the way that her debut did, it's probably still her best album overall. Mostly because it was the most streamlined, personal, and devoid of the blatant pop pandering that has cropped up across, really, the rest of her career, especially coming off The Best Damn Thing in 2007. And yet, paradoxically, My Happy Ending was probably the most accessible song off that record and arguably one of her best, period. Most because it plays the breakup with enough snide maturity to accept it, but with enough genuine aggression to still want to beat the shit out of this ex-boyfriend. Sure, it wasn't that complicated, so to speak, but outside of Pink, whose own darker, nastier project had unfairly stalled out a few months earlier, Avril Lavigne could sell righteous teenage girl fury better than anybody else on the radio, while keeping the genuine passion at the core of the song and putting it in a pop package that really connected. It's catchy as hell. And as a delivery mechanism for this sort of seething melodrama, with a perfectly placed string section on the bridge to notch things up just a little bit more, Avril Lavigne would never sound better. And 14 years later, I think we could all use a little bit more rage like this on the Hot 100, be it from Avril Lavigne or anybody else, because this song, kick-ass. Number 2. So of the songs that are topping this list that will surprise nobody, absolutely nobody, it's this one especially. Hell, it's widely considered one of the best songs of the 2000s period from any genre in any year. The critics adore it, and for once the public, they completely agree. And hell, it's not like they're wrong. It would take until 2004 for singles from Speakerboxxx Love Below to land on the Hot 100 proper and this year-end list. And there were 3 of them that had a shot to make this list. And while I was very much prepared to put all of them on here, except I've never entirely been crazy about Sleepy Brown's hook on The Way You Move, and Rose's sadly has not aged nearly as well as, say, Bombs Over Baghdad or Miss Jackson, instrumentally or especially lyrically. But hey, yeah, it's damn near note perfect, and anybody who says otherwise, they are wrong and should be ignored. The gleaming key flutters on the hook against the thick, happy burble of the bass, the hand claps, the amazingly well-timed ad-libs, the way Andre 3000 contorts across the track with an infectious, nervy energy that highlights how elastic and potent of a performer he was and how we can't get anything more. Andre, come back! We need you here! And that's before we even get to the content, which is half a relationship sputtering out as our protagonist realized love isn't quite there, and half braggadocious silliness that is so amazingly quotable in its deflection from any deeper issue, you're kind of just sucked along for the ride anyway. And I genuinely love the video, slyly taking back an Ed Sullivan Show-esque backdrop to establish the track back in the historical rock pantheon. Andre, he's always known his music history, and the shameless retro swagger of the whole affair makes a song like this timeless in a way that so much of the crunk of this era isn't. I might like a lot of it, but it hasn't exactly held up, especially when it comes to the production. Yes, it's genuinely heartbreaking that OutKast was never able to effectively follow up this commercial peak. I mean, I genuinely like Idlewild, but I think I'm pretty much the only one. But hey, we all still have Hey Ya, and that's damn near classic. I challenge you to say otherwise. But before we can get to what could possibly be better here, let's knock out a few honorable mentions, shall we? I told you all that Alicia Keys put out her best singles in 2004, and man, this one was excruciatingly difficult to cut. The naturalistic framing and the instrumentation with co-writing credits from John Legend, production from Kanye West, the fact that someone like Alicia Keys can slip into pure love-struck girl next door territory despite being Alicia freaking Keys and being able to have any man that she wants. The fact that it's such a straightforward, classy love song, but told so effectively that you don't even really notice or care. Really, the only reason it didn't make the list proper is because it runs a little long and can feel a tad underwritten at points. That's one of the common problems with a lot of Alicia Keys' work. But still, the song won her another Grammy, and for once, very well deserved.
I fold it up and put it in my shirt, pick up my gun and get back to work. And it keeps me driving on, waiting on letters from home.
This song genuinely snuck up on me, and it was also a very serious contender to make this list. John Michael Montgomery's last big hit, a song that takes the wartime atmosphere and doesn't feel jingoistic or pandering in capturing the family relationship that was across the world. And you know what? When you have a genuinely great voice like John Michael Montgomery against straightforward country instrumentation and production, it's a song that just goes down effectively, especially when you get that gut punch of a final verse that, yeah, plays the father-son dynamic and does it really well. It's also one of those songs that leaves more in its subtext than outright text, which could be happening outside those letters, be it both either in America or on the battlefield. And the fact that John Michael Montgomery can sell that possibility by what's not being said, you know what? I gotta respect a song like this. Genuinely underrated, not been heard by enough people. Check it out.
These are my confessions. Just when I thought I said all I can say, my chick on the side says she got one on the way. These are my confessions. Man, I'm thrown and I don't know what to do. I guess I gotta keep part 2 of my confession.
Not gonna lie, the reason this song makes the honorable mentions and not quite the list proper is that it can't quite take it seriously anymore thanks to Weird Al Yankovic's Confessions Part 3, which is one of his funniest ever songs. But even with that, Confessions Part 2 is a tour de force of panicked relationship melodrama that at least Usher can convincingly sell. And while R. Kelly might have played in similar territory, and believe me, he had some contenders to make this list, he was big in 2004, but Usher's legacy and natural charisma is nowhere close to as tainted as R. Kelly's is now. And even if Confessions Part 2 can feel deeply silly at points, Usher, he's that good. He can make it work. I gotta respect that.
Yeah, this the real one, baby.
baby.
I'm telling you,
Chi-town stand up. Southside, Southside, we gon' set this party off right. Westside, West.
So I've always struggled with Kanye West's self-deprecating attacks on consumerism, this being one of his first big ones through the lens of a black woman, then on his own, trying to dig into the complicated pathology that drives him or her to spend money that he doesn't have on increasingly fragile flexing that props up a system that he's still gonna criticize. I mean, I appreciate the nuance and the focus of a song like this, along with the details that highlight deficiencies in education in the prison industrial complex and all the whole inherent insecurities that comes with all those dropping of brand names. And you know what? I really dig how Kanye West interpolates Lauryn Hill of all people with the acoustic guitar and a really great hook from Syleena Johnson. But you know what? It never quite got all the way there for me. The Showgirls reference was pretty cringy. Happy because, again, there are a few too many jokey setups, and I wished more of the song embraced the storytelling beyond just Kanye West's own perspective, instead of monopolizing the second and the third verse. Give him the third verse, but give the second to somebody else. Still, a damn good song though. Have to respect it. So at this point, No Doubt was basically being held together with string and duct tape, and Gwen Stefani was already pushing her solo career, which would blow up in a big way in the next couple of years. So hey, if they wanted to go out with a slick cover of a great Talk Talk song, hell, why not? The production is gorgeous, the groove is slick as hell, and Gwen Stefani can vamp like few other pop stars in this vein and in this era. It's not really better than the original, which is a new wave classic, but that slick synth groove and the gentle opulence is executed amazingly well. And as a pretty damn good cover, No Doubt, at least to me, they do it justice.
Some people want diamond rings, some just want everything, but everything means nothing if I ain't got you. Yeah.
Hey, what did I say about Alicia Keys this year? Granted, while more of this is what you would expect traditionally from her, she can still sell this sort of passionate soul ballad pretty much better than anybody else in this era and time. Again, it suffers from being a shade underwritten, especially when you read about Alicia Keys' real-world influences in the songwriting, part of that being the death of Aaliyah. But again, when she sounds so damn good, it's hard for me to care. This is a terrific song.
And every time I see you in my dreams, I see your face, it's haunting me. I guess I need you, baby.
Okay, when anybody thinks of Britney Spears in 2004, they typically think of Toxic, a song that I've never really liked and has production that has aged a lot worse than you remember. Everytime, meanwhile, it never needed to sound slick or polished or refined, mostly because it was a sort of vulnerable moment that you never really got from Britney, and its edge comes in how frail and sincere it is. Granted, part of this has only been reinforced by me watching Spring Breakers entirely too many times. If you know the scene, you'll get why. But when you realize that Britney actually wrote this herself, and yes, it is probably about Justin Timberlake, it's surprisingly moving, even if you weren't really invested in the slow-moving train wreck that would be Britney Spears' life in the mid-2000s that became way too easy to mock at that time. But you know what, with a song like Everytime, when there was something real there, it reminds us there was some humanity, and I respect that. And this song, yeah, for me, holds up. Okay, back to the last entry on this list, number 1. It's incredibly rare when the public consensus and the critical consensus aligns directly. And not in retrospect, but at that precise moment where everybody heard something, universally agreed it was awesome, let's make this inescapable, especially that when that song was at the zenith of a popular trend. For a song to be the biggest of a year and still be critically beloved and to still actually hold up to this day, you know what, that's something special, that's something you want to talk about. But really, is there any place I can end this list beyond Peace Up, A-Town Down?
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Usher, Usher,
Let's go.
And really, could it it be anything else? For many people, if you're going to ask them what song best represents popular music in the 2000s, Yeah by Usher featuring Lil Jon and Ludacris will probably come to mind the most. It's entrenched itself in the popular psyche. And that, for the record, is a great thing, because Yeah is an awesome goddamn song, damn near a classic in its own right. Maybe not the moment that made the careers of every act involved, but certainly a high point. Would Usher be considered a figure on the A-list of R&B to this day if it wasn't for Yeah? Or give Lil Jon the boost to propel crunk to the very top for several more years? Or give Ludacris the clout to become as huge as he would be in the decade to come? Yeah, none of these acts ever returned to the level of success that Yeah gave them in 2004, with the blaring synth loops, the shrill whirs, the sandy beat, and the unbelievable catchiness. But I doubt they could even if they wanted to. It was a moment in time, a dance floor jam coasting on the huge, amazingly well-balanced charisma and ego of all three men. Again, it was never a song that evoked a lot of thought, but in the vein of the best crunk and B hits, it never needed it. Coasting on superb multi-tracking, Lil Jon is the best possible hype man, and Ludacris rarely ever sounding better on a verse with nothing wasted, not a single bad line. In short, sometimes the public, the critics, and me all come together in loving something, and Yeah, the biggest and the best hit song of 2004, I don't think any of us would have it any other way. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I can imagine you guys might have some debating with this list, but hey, there's the comments. Have fun. Beyond that, if you guys want to support this channel, maybe request more top 10 lists, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. Happy to have you guys on board. Want to see my schedule? It's on my Instagram, link below. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.